question on the Mexican border. This is not making any sense at all. The news reports out of Guatemala and El Salvador, among other places, are now that they are going on television saying if you come to the United States, they're not turning you away. I don't know how, a 3-year-old child ends up on our side of the border from Guatemala. How did that 3-year-old make it? But we are now rushing, while we have 100,000 veterans who are not being taken care of, we are rushing to help these people that are coming across the border. And I have no problem with kids or anything else, but we are building a refugee camp. We're developing the Palestinian Israel situation in our own country. And what is the solution here? I know that Eric Cantor was racing for comprehensive immigration reform, but what is the solution, Ted?
Well, what is happening right now on the border, particularly with kids, is heartbreaking. And it is the direct consequence of President Obama's lawlessness, of his refusal to enforce the law. And in particular, 2 years ago, where he illegally granted amnesty to some 800,000 people here illegally who were largely minors. And, if you look at the numbers, you can see the direct consequence of the president's action. In 2011, about 6,000 unaccompanied minors entered the U.S. In 2012, that rose to 14,000. In 2013, it rose to 24,000. In 2014, the estimates are that 90,000 children, unaccompanied children, will be apprehended, and the Obama administration expects that number to grow to 145,000 in 2015. That's up from 6,000. And one of the things...
By the way, so people understand, 120,000, it would make it the 24th largest city in Texas.
Well, and one of the things all of us should be horrified at, look, you can understand... You have parents now are handing their children over to global criminal cartels. These coyotes are not, nice little social workers. They are bad people, and you're getting a lot of these kids are teenagers. They're young boys. They're young girls. They're being sexually assaulted. They're being physically assaulted. They're being sold into prostitution. I mean, it is horrific. It should make us weep at the idea of children being handed over to cruel, brutal drug traffickers. And all of this is the direct consequence when the President of the United States tells people, just send your kids up here and we will let them in and ignore the law. Those incentives have produced this humanitarian crisis. And I will note, I think the administration is suddenly talking about it. It's been happening for a long time, but the administration is talking about it now because I think it's quite likely it is the President's intention, just like he did 2 years ago, a couple of months before the election, to unilaterally grant another big amnesty because he thinks it'll help him politically, and it's lawless. The president's constitutional responsibility is to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, and we've never seen a president like this president.
Okay, so here's Senator. Here is the frustrating part for most Americans. I know that. You know that. The president knows that. It's lawlessness. But the president also knows, as does everybody else in Washington, nobody is going to do anything. So what is it we as citizens are supposed to feel or supposed to do? Because, quite honestly, we're becoming more and more disenfranchised, which is a very bad thing. We're feeling more and more invisible. But, if I make one single error, if I own a restaurant and my refrigeration is down by 2 degrees, they'll shut me down. But the president and people in Washington can do whatever the hell they want. Illegal immigrants can do whatever the hell they want, and it doesn't matter. Nobody's going to jail. Nobody's going to have any repercussions. What are you guys going to do, Senator?
Well, Glenn, let me give you some encouragement, which is as bad as it is getting, and it is getting bad. We're seeing liberty under assault. We're seeing an administration trampling our constitutional rights, disregarding the rule of law. But as bad as it is getting, it is waking people up. It is waking people up. You look at the results in Virginia last night. Dave Bratt was outspent almost 50-1.
Yeah.
And yet the people woke up and said, we're tired of business as usual in Washington. You look at the Senate election results in Mississippi, where the fourth longest serving member of the Senate has suddenly found himself in a runoff because Chris McDaniel is running a strong grassroots campaign.
Yeah, he's up 3 points now. Chris McDaniel is up 3 points, and the runoff is the 24th.
And Glenn, how does Washington respond? Washington responds by heaping lies and personal attacks and trying to attack any candidate who takes on the Washington status quo, but also to try to attack fundamentally the people. But the reason I'm optimistic, you asked what can we do? The biggest thing we can do is rise up and demand that our elected officials in both parties listen to the people, that we hold every elected official accountable. And I think 2014 is going to be a very strong election year, but I think 2016 is going to be even stronger, because sometimes things have to get really bad to startle people out of their slumber, to wake them up and say, it's now or never. This is, we either stand up now or we will lose the greatest country in the history of the world.
What is the update, if you have any, and are you involved at all trying to get Sergeant Tamarisi out of prison in Mexico? With all of this stuff going on, we dump 50,000 or 30,000 prisoners out on the streets. If you've raped somebody, if you've been in a drunk driving accident here in America, you know what? We'll just dump you out on the street anyway. And yet we have Sergeant Tamarisi, who is one of our finest, who is down trying to get medical treatment in San Diego. He makes a mistake. He's living in his car. He has guns in his car, but it's because he has everything he owns in the car. He's just started medical treatment down in San Diego and moved there. And they put him in a maximum security drug lord prison where his life is at stake. And for the life of me, we can't get anybody in Washington to talk about this one at all.
Well, listen, Glenn, I agree with you, and I'll tell you that there has been a pattern in the Obama administration that when you have Americans wrongfully imprisoned abroad, this administration has failed to stand up for them, whether it is Sergeant Tamarisi or whether it is Pastor Saeed Abedini in Iran or whether it is Kenneth Bae in North Korea or whether it is Miriam Ibrahim, who's married to an American who is in a prison in Sudan with her toddler son and her infant, brand new newborn baby girl, and she's sentenced to die for the crime of being a Christian. And I'll tell you, Miriam Ibrahim is an instance. Her sentence, she has been sentenced to be lashed 100 times and then hung by the neck to dead till she is dead, unless she renounces Christ. And Miriam Ibrahim has said, I will not renounce Christ. And I have to say the consistent pattern across all of these is, where is the President of the United States? The President should be standing up and defending Americans and working to bring Americans home. And unfortunately, this President has not been doing that.
So again, I go back to, Ted, this audience, we have 8 million people just in the radio audience. We have a footprint now of almost 50 million people a month. Uniques, 50 million unique individuals a month. And they are hungry to do something that has meaning, not to sit here and protest, not to make stupid signs and show up and be ignored again, but actually move on something. How can we help her? How can we help Sergeant Tamarisi? What needs to happen?
Well, we can all speak out. We can pick up the phone. We can call our elected representatives. We can call our senators and call upon them to speak out.
How much of a difference? Because Ted, I'm sorry that I don't mean to take my frustration out on you, because you are one of the good guys.
I understand
clearly.
The frustration.
Right.
I promise you, I am.
I know you have to feel the same.
Living it every day, Glenn.
Right, I know. So how much difference did this really make last night? The president immediately came out and said, well, it's just the extremist, and the problem was that Eric Cantor, he didn't have an immigration policy, and it just shows how hateful the Tea Party is. All of this crap. How much difference did it make? That damn Mitch McConnell being back into the Senate really pisses me off. Lindsey Graham really pisses me off. How scared are these guys?
Oh, look, Washington, D.C. doesn't want to listen. I mean, the fight to make D.C. listen is not an easy fight. I mean, there's a reason people have been in power 20, 30 years. They hold on to power, they use a lot of money, and they use the force of influence to try to hold on to it. But I'll tell you, things like last night get their attention. Things like the Mississippi Senate race get their attention.
By the way, Mississippi, that is June 24th, Chris McDaniel. You throw Tad Cochran out and vote for Chris McDaniel, you will again put the fear of God in their soul. And Chris is up by 3 points now. It's the runoff, and it's June 24th.
I've said many times, Glenn, in fact, I've said many times on your show that I think the biggest divide we have in this country is not between Republicans and Democrats. It is between entrenched politicians in Washington in both parties and the American people. And what you're trying to do, what your listeners are trying to do, what I think the American people realize we've got to do if we're going to pull this country back from the fiscal and economic cliff is we've got to get the people to rise up and demand that we get back to basic common sense principle, that we get back to living within our means, not bankrupting the country, to following the Constitution, to restoring America's leadership in the world. I mean, these are basic principles of who we are. Now, will Washington demagogue anyone standing up for that and call them an extremist? Yes, that's what Washington does. Who cares? Ignore them, and we need to focus on energizing and mobilizing the American people to bring our nation back to the first principles of liberty and the Constitution that have made America strong in the first place.
I will tell you